Welcome back. I'm Richard Dolan here with my friend and colleague Jim Mars talking about some fascinating things. I just want to mention that tomorrow night I will be a guest just briefly on Coast to Coast AM radio. Guest host George Knapp will be there. I'll be talking prior to the appearance of Grant Cameron, or maybe at the same time we may have Grant on. And we'll be talking about Grant's new book, which I am, my company, Keyhole Publishing, is the publisher of. And I personally did a lot of work on this book with Grant. It's called UFOs, Area 51, and Government Informants. I should mention it's Grant Cameron and Scott Crane are the co-authors of that book. It's a significant update and expansion of a book they wrote 20 years ago. This is a really important book. I would have to say it might be the most important book in recent years on government informants on the UFO phenomenon, and the research and organization and writing is excellent. And we'll be talking about that tomorrow night on Coast to Coast. So if you're around, go check it out. I am here with Jim Mars. We have been, the Kennedy assassination is just, I think, something that fascinates just about every American citizen.
Hey, Richard, before you form your question there, send me a copy of that new book. It sounds fascinating, and I will respond with a copy of our Occulted History.
You got it. I'm very excited about this book. Grant and Scott did a very fine job, and I will just add that I was quite active myself in the editing and a lot of the consultation of the book. I mean, they're the authors, but I really was quite involved. And for the last month and a half, 2 months, I've been deep into working through that book, so I feel like I know it as well as they do at this point.
Well, you realize that your name adds credibility to the whole thing.
Well, I thank you for that. My name's not really on the book, and I kept my name off of it intentionally. I didn't want to do anything, but it is it's published by Keyhole Publishing, and I certainly was quite involved in it.
Give me a copy.
Yes, I will. I'll absolutely send it off to you. Regarding Kennedy, and then we can move on to some other things, but I don't know if we were on the break talking about this or if you got into this before we went to the break, because we did chat a little bit when we were off the air, but the Federal Reserve connection. And we were talking a little bit about Lincoln and a little bit about Kennedy, both being the two presidents who had the one common thing where they issued non-internationally bank-sponsored money.
Right.
That they did it. They both got shot in the back of the head in public. So
surely everybody realizes that today the bulk of the revenues brought in by the federal government of the United States today goes to euphemistically retire the national debt, which now stands in excess of $16 trillion. And by the way, that's why my last book, The $1 Trillion Conspiracy, that sounds so dull. And that was not my title. They made me change it. Okay?
You had a way better title. I know what this one is.
Yeah, my title was Zombie Nation.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
We are a zombie nation because we're dead, but we're broke, but we're just going through the motions. And the reason I can say that is because we are, by most conservative estimates, $16 trillion in debt. And yet it's been estimated if every man, woman, and child in the country was to sell off everything they've got, all the clothes, TVs, cars, homes, everything, we couldn't come up with but about $9, maybe $10 trillion. So
you know what burns me? What burns me is that when you read up on the Federal Reserve, like the Wikipedia entry, for example, they'll tell you, oh, yeah, the profits from the Federal Reserve go to the U.S. government. I mean, they say that. And, I mean, maybe even if that's true, that's not nearly enough to take it on the other side, which is the U.S. servicing the debt that comes from the Federal Reserve.
Right. And they keep talking about raising the debt ceiling, and now there's even serious talk about doing away with the debt ceiling. Okay? We just keep printing money. All right? It's amazing. And folks, it's just simple, okay? You come home, you find out the sewer's backed up, and your house is full of sewage. Okay, now, I ask you, what do? Do you pump it out, or do you raise the roof so you can get more in?
Oh, my God. Good way to put it.
It's that simple. They just keep, and the thing is, it's inflation is what it is, because the more money in circulation, the less it's worth. That's why everybody today, you look back, you probably got more money in the bank today than you did, say, in 1980. Okay, but in 1980 you could buy a hamburger for $1.50, and today it's $5.50 or $7 for a hamburger. So it's inflation, and that's what happens. And Kennedy was taking steps to try to get us off of this banker tyranny. His Treasury Secretary, John Saxon, I believe it was taking steps to return banking powers to the state and privately owned banks and away from the Federal Reserve System. And then, of course, as I mentioned before the break, he actually began to issue money through the Treasury Department. It gets complicated, but then they keep the money situated very complicated just so that we don't understand what's going on. But greed is still greed, and theft is still theft, and it's pretty amazing.
It seems that Kennedy was killed. He had to be sized up by these people at the top of our power pyramid as a threat on so many multiple levels. That's the thing that made him so dangerous.
Let me correct myself. It's not John Saxon. His Secretary of Comptroller of the Currency was James Saxon. And he had been at odds with the Federal Reserve Board for a long time by encouraging broader investment lending powers for banks that were not part of the Federal Reserve System. He also had decided that non-reserve banks could underwrite state and local general obligation bonds, further weakening the Federal Reserve System. So, and by the way, also, who was against Kennedy? The Rockefellers. Okay, David Rockefeller was purchasing full-page ads in the New York Times saying how his economic policies were detrimental to the good of the country, which means they were detrimental to David Rockefeller.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So that shows you that the power of this country was massed against him. And then you have these violent, radical groups like the Mafia and the anti-Castro Cubans who the CIA had told and blamed Kennedy for the failure of the Bay of Pigs. They were ready to go kill him.
Well, I'm going to raise one.
All you got to do is think about it, what half the country today thinks about Barack Hussein Obama. Okay, now and then multiply that by 10, because back then it was rougher, tumbler times, and people hadn't been dumbed down and drugged out, and they were, the right wing was very vociferous. They, had the John Birch Society and the Ku Klux Klan and the Minutemen, and and so, but it was the same thing. If there's even been talk in the mainstream media about the possibility of assassination attempt on Obama, and if that was to happen, then at least half the country would kind of go, oh well, and so and that was it. It was a feeling. It was a theology that was sweeping through the country.
I want to mention one more thing, that I have a feeling JFK scholars they hate this connection, but it has to be mentioned in my opinion. That's the UFO connection. And the only reason I'm saying it is that there was a declassified top secret memo from November 12th, 1963, a Kennedy memo to the director of the CIA, where he talked about a classification review of all UFO intelligence files affecting national security.
And he wanted them all turned over to the White House, didn't he?
That's what it looks like. Yes. So
and if that had happened, then that's tantamount to making it public, because the White House would have leaked them like mad.
Exactly. So I just think, he was perceived as this multifaceted threat. So like in the old days, when I first started learning about this, I thought, well, what was the reason? What was the group? Why they killed him? And it just seems to me there was every reason, because he was really involved.
And every group.
And they all wanted him, and they all were connected at the top anyway.
That's right. Exactly. And once you know that Johnson wasn't going to do anything, it wasn't going to come after you. In fact, he and his buddy Hoover had helped cover the whole thing up. Then, then you just move ahead on. But you realize that'll never come out. That'll never be recognized, because to do so would mean that every government we've had since 1963 has been illegitimate.
Exactly.
Which means all of the treaties, all of the laws, all of the contracts, everything's been done is by the boards. So they will never admit that. That's why when they say, will we ever know the truth? Hey, you can know the truth right now today. I'm telling you the truth, okay? But don't believe me. Don't trust me. Go check it out for yourself. Find out,
Honestly,
find out about all the missing evidence. Find out about all the witnesses that were intimidated into silence or forced to change their testimony, or sometimes official documents altered to say the opposite of what they actually said in the first place. Phony photographs, faked x-rays, even the Zapruder film. It now is beyond question. This was alleged, and I think I mentioned this in Crossfire back in the 80s, and now it's nailed down. The Zapruder film was taken to New York the night of the assassination, was in the hands of the National Photographic Interpretation Center, the CIA's photographic state-of-the-art thing. So they manipulated it. And now there's even interviews with the fellows who were there working on it.
Yeah.
So it's beyond question. So you can't even trust the Zapruder film.
Yeah. God.
So, I mean,
And to get the truth out, for it to be openly acknowledged would be tantamount to, I think, potentially a revolutionary act, just as with 9/11.
Yeah. We'd have to have something similar to the collapse of communism in the Soviet Union. We'd have to have the whole system restructured and kind of broken down, start all over again for that to ever come out and be made and established in a public way.
It's like either they would cause a revolution, or only a revolution would allow them to be discussed openly, because then it wouldn't be so relevant to hide the fact. If it was a true revolution, then it could be possible. But, oh, my God. So can you talk a little bit about your other book that you got coming out, Our Occulted History?
Oh, Our Occulted History. Well, as I said, I start off explaining that the word occulted in this sense has nothing to do with vampires, werewolves, witches, devil worship, or anything that we commonly think of as the occult. The word occult simply means hidden. And I'm using it in the astronomical sense. When the moon eclipses the sun, that's called an occultation, and it just means it's hidden the sun. So our occulted history in this sense means our hidden history. Well, what's hidden from us? Well, number one, almost everything we think we know is probably wrong, as we are finding out. But let me point out, here's one thing. Just consider what this means. Every presidential election in America, including George Washington, has been won by the candidate with the most British and French royal genes. In 2000, Burke's Peerage, very prestigious genealogical publication in England, predicted George W. Bush would win the presidency over Al Gore because even though both Bush and Gore were related and of royal blood connected to the Windsors, the royal family of England, the Bush family was more closely connected. And sure enough, Bush ended up being president.
In a rather dodgy election, we all know. In a
dodgy election. Same thing with Kerry. Kerry, it turns out, is also related to Bush and also related to the Windsors. But here's the clincher. So you think, well, now we got Barack Hussein Obama in, so he can't possibly be connected to all these old white guys, can he? Well, wait a minute. According to Lynn Cheney, the wife of Dick Cheney, when she was researching for a book on his family, they found out that Obama is the eighth cousin of Dick Cheney. Because according to Cheney, Mrs. Cheney, he is a descendant of Maureen Duval, a French Huguenot whose son married the granddaughter of a Richard Cheney who had arrived in Maryland in the late 1650s. So he is a distant relative of Dick Cheney. But if you think that's weird enough, the Chicago Sun-Times reported that both Obama and Cheney are blood relations to the Bush family. According to that paper, Bush and Obama are 10th cousins, and they're linked through a 17th century Massachusetts couple, Samuel Hinckley and Sarah Sewell.
All right, well, I don't want to say that this isn't important, but, I mean, how close is a 10th cousin? It doesn't sound like it's...
Hinckley is a relative of George Herbert Walker Bush's friend, John Warnock Hinckley, whose son, John Warnock Hinckley Jr., was the man accused of shooting President Reagan in 1981. Now, do you really think all this is just some sheer coincidence?
Yeah. No, I don't.
They're all related back. Yeah. The 42 presidents up to Bill Clinton, 33, were related to two people, Alfred the Great, King of England, and Charlemagne, the monarch of France. And, of course, there are those who say, and there's some truth to this, that if you go back far enough, I mean, you know, if you are an adherent of the Bible, then you could say, well, we're all related because we all go back to Adam, you know, right? I guess if you go back further enough.
Well, that's just the one thing that I wondered, you know, how much do you make of, like, 8th or 10th cousin connection? I just don't personally know how common or uncommon that type of a thing is.
Well, it's not that uncommon, and like I said, you'll find this, but what's uncommon is that there are people who have no connection. And somehow they never get elected. They're not there.
True.
As I say, and then you have to go back and you've read Rule by Secrecy.
Oh, yeah.
So you understand the importance to these people of the blue blood line. Okay. And
you mentioned. I hate to interrupt you. I'm sorry. You mentioned Hinckley.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just hate getting off track, but the connection. Hinckley fascinates me. And I read in a book by the late Jim Keith about the Hinckley connection to the Bush family.
Yes.
Which is quite close.
His brother was going to have dinner with Jeb Bush the night he shot Reagan. Now, see, it's just too much. There's just too much interconnection here.
And Hinckley's
you don't find any of these things taking place with people, named John Smith from Muleshoe, Texas. I mean, it's just, and it's I don't know. There's something going on, and I can blow your mind further by mentioning. I'm sure you understand what sidereal time is. But for your listeners who may not be
it's like there's because the Earth's going around the sun and the sun's in motion, right? So that's how we break it down, the rotation of the Earth around the sun, into 24 hours, and that's our time telling method. But it's squirrely because right now it's a certain time here in Texas, but on the West Coast it's 2 hours earlier. On the East Coast it's an hour later. So it's weird. So NASA and even the old seafarers, they use sidereal time, which is keeping time by the movement of the stars, which rotate very, very slowly. But it too is broken into 24 hours, right? Okay. Yeah. So now, here's the point. All of the dead Kennedys and injured Kennedys all died inside the 16th sidereal hour. That would be like saying all of the Kennedys, Joe Kennedy Jr., who died in a plane crash during World War II over off the coast of England on a secret mission. And John F. Kennedy, he shot in Dallas. Mm-hmm. And then Robert Kennedy killed in Los Angeles. Right. John Kennedy Jr. killed in a plane crash, 2010. And they all died in the same hour. Wait a minute. That's incredible.
How could that be? And this has been verified by the Vatican Observatory out in Arizona. And
there's 24 hours to choose from.
24 hours, yeah.
They all got the same one.
And to add to the spookiness, according to Masonic theology, the 16th sidereal hour is the hour of revenge.
Holy crud.
Wait a minute.
Well, here's the question.
Wait a minute.
How would Joe...
I question it. It's like, wait a minute. Who's doing this? How's that happening, you know? But it's true. I'm telling you, there's so much weird stuff going on. Of course, you're never going to hear about this in mainstream media because they can't get away from just the, you know, ha-ha, how are you? How do you like getting in town today?
No, that is mind-blowing. That is mind-blowing.
Isn't that mind-blowing? Now, but the thing is, here's the thing. Now, look how that fits in with, and I know you're conversant with this issue, the fact that all the major space missions, certainly through the Apollo missions, the time and date of the launches were determined not by any scientific method, but by the alignment of the constellations.
Yes, and in fact, they were also intimately determined by, I can't remember his name now, a young Egyptian kind of scientist who, oh golly, I'm drawing a total blank here, who seemed to have inordinate political control over the launch date and location of where the missions would go. All of it seemed to have no scientific value at all, but all seemed to be connected with Masonic, somehow connected with
astrological alignment. Now, so think about that. See, it doesn't matter whether you or I or your listeners, you know, whether they want to believe in this stuff. The point is, somebody who has enough power to set NASA missions does.
Well, this is taking you really into like a new version of rule by secrecy, where you take the ruling elites of today and you basically walk back through history and you go all the way back. And
all the way back, and what do we find? Ancient astronauts, spacefaring entities who visited the Earth in prehistory. And I think one of the strongest arguments to support that idea is the simple fact that virtually every primitive civilization and tribe in the world, whether it's the Dogon tribe in Africa, and there's controversy over that, or the Apaches, or the Hopis, or the Aborigines in Australia, or they are the Sumerian tablets that are still in existence, and they all said that, or the Mayans, or the Aztecs, they all said that visitors came from the sky in flying machines and taught them how to grow things and how to a language and all kinds of stuff.
That's true. And
so
it's
how can we say it didn't happen?
Yeah.
Other than just say it didn't happen. So now, here we go. Let's assume that the ancient Sumerian tablets and all of these stories and ancient legends from primitive cultures all around the world were telling the truth, and that sometime in our prehistory that there were extraterrestrials on the Earth, spacefaring people who came here and colonized, brought weird plants and animals perhaps, and taught agriculture and language, law, medicine. Yeah. All right, let's assume for the sake of argument that that's true. Did they all leave, or some of them still here? That's an interesting question. But how do we answer that? Well, to me, it's pretty simple. We simply look at history, not as it's taught in school, but as we find by actually studying history. Now, if it turns out that, as we are taught in school, that the human race simply came from cave dwellers, and then hunter-gatherers, and then finally cities, and then city-states, and then nations, and then empires, and then it was one slow evolutionary climb. Okay, that's what we've been taught. But that's not really what history tells us, is it? You go back and you find out the Chinese are talking about the flying dragons, and the Hindus are talking about the Vamas and the warfare in the skies and the nuclear blast, and then you got flying saucers, and you've got the flying shields of the Romans in the Middle Ages, and the Great Airship Mystery of 1897, and UFOs today, and the abduction phenomena and crop circles. Oh wow! Wait a minute.
Jacques Vallée had a good book on that whole ancient connection recently, by the way. Hey, listen, let's take one break. well, one final break, and then you're going to come back, and we're going to wrap everything up. Well, one more segment. But I'm Richard Dolan here with Jim Mars. It's been fabulous on the Richard Dolan Show on KGRA. Don't go away. We have one segment to return. Back here on KGRA Radio, I'm Richard Dolan here with Jim Mars. Hey, Jim, if people want to check you out online, what's the best place or way for them to learn about you?
I guess best bet would be my website, which oddly enough is jimmars.com.
That's easy enough.
Jim Mars, M-A-S, 2 R's in Mars, M-A-R-R-S.com. And even though I'm really crunched and we get a chance to get on there a lot, I try to post stuff now and then that I feel like is of interest and maybe significant, and that is not being covered in the mainstream media.
Yeah.
Plus, of course, you got access to all my books and videos and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I'm on your page right now. It's a nice looking page, and it's got all the stuff that I think people want to see about you.
I would think so. And then I refuse to get bogged down in Facebook, but I do have a Facebook page, and I do keep up with that.
I tried friending you on Facebook, but you got too many friends.
I know.
I couldn't get in.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm working on that, Rich. I really am. I'm working on that. But what I found out was I got to bump 300 people before I can put you on there.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I have my own ways of reaching you.
Yes.
So, in our in the segment we have left, can we talk a little bit more about our occulted history? And I remember
I was going to try to finish my thought.
Yeah,
here.
please.
So if we assume that there were spacefaring extraterrestrials on the Earth in the distant past, and as confirmed by all of the ancient legends, and then that brings the question of, did they all leave? Are they all still here? And I think just a cursory review of real history would show that, wait a minute, somebody's still here. Well, wait a minute now. If some of them are still here, then where are they? Who are they? What are they trying to do, right? Okay, well, now, let's assume for the sake of argument that they're stuck here, because there seems to be a lot of evidence that there was a giant war and upheavals in the past, the Great Flood, the accounts of what seems to be atomic explosions both in India and at Sodom and Gomorrah, and the fact that elevated radiation levels have been found in the Sinai Desert and also over again in the Indus Valley. So let's say there was a big shootout or some kind of catastrophe took place, either natural or artificial, and most of them all left, but left some of them behind. Maybe they marooned them, So now you got some that are stuck here. They know they came from somewhere else. They're like Charlton Heston. They're stuck on the planet of the apes. Okay, and they know that they come from somewhere else, but they've lost the technology to get back, and they've had to go along with whatever technology is available on the Earth, which you go back a few hundred years and a couple of 2,000 years, and that's pretty primitive. So they've been kicking us along, and we've been steadily improving our technology. Well, now they're just about to the point to where we have interplanetary technology.
Right.
But, of course, they wouldn't want to be just one of the apes. They want to run the planet of the apes. But how can you physically control 6 billion apes? And the fact is you can't, except perhaps through secrecy and deceit. You keep the apes fighting with each other and squabbling with each other over inconsequential matters while you run the show. Oops. Now, all of a sudden, we're into a whole new area, and this is what my book, Our Occulted History, is all about, is drawing the connection between the ancient astronauts down through history to what is now euphemistically called the New World Order. There's a handful of people trying to run the world, and even the Occupy movement understands that.
Sure.
Where they're unprepared to go is that, hey, this is nothing new. This goes all the way back, and what I show is the connecting threads, bloodlines that are the same bloodlines. What I found really, really fascinating was that the Rothschilds, the famous banking family of Europe, they have largely been accused of being at the top of this financial power pyramid, and they claim ancestry to Nimrod, one of the ancient Sumerian gods. So, wait a minute. Are they really connected? And are they in touch?
How would they know that?
Or are they?
How would anyone know that they're connected that far back?
Because they claim ancestry. They claim to be the descendants of Nimrod.
There's a question in the chat room. I don't want to break your concentration, but it is interesting. And one person just wants to know, since you've researched and uncovered so much, have you ever been harassed or threatened to keep quiet?
No, I've been treated with benign neglect. You don't see me on Oprah. You don't see me on Hannity or Bill O'Reilly. You know, they just say, I'm just the nut down in Texas. You know, they keep it low key. I got in an unusual position in that by happenstance and perhaps luck, I managed to get some books out that were telling the truth, and they were big sellers. Crossfire and Rule of Secrecy and Alien Agenda. Okay, so now they're caught between the rock and the hard place. They really don't want to publish me. If I was just starting out and I had all the same information that I've been so successful with, I guarantee you I would not get a major publisher. But they can't really turn me down because I've made them so much money. So, so they just ignore me. I don't get on the major networks. I don't get here and there, and they try to act like I'm just the local conspiracy theorist. And as long as as long as they can keep me barefoot in the kitchen, then they don't worry about me.
One other person asks, again in the chat room, do you have an opinion on the research of Dr. Judy Wood, who, of course, has written about 9/11? And
yes, I do. I met Judy Wood, and I think she's definitely onto something. All you have to do is look at those films of steel girders just disintegrating in midair, and the fact that those two twin towers should have produced rubble piles of 4 to maybe even 6 stories high. Instead, it's only about 1.5. Where'd it all go? Where are the toilets?
Exactly. Yeah.
Where are the toilets? Okay. It should have been 1,000 toilets lying around there.
I have her book and I've read it too, and it's very powerful. It's called Where Did the Towers Go?
But I will say I'm not totally convinced of her idea that some sort of beam. I am pretty convinced that some sort of exotic beam weapon was used. But here's the thing: I don't think you have to look for satellites. We don't have enough time to get into this, but there was some UFO bring downs happened on Long Island back in the late 80s and early 90s, and I have learned that reportedly that was due to a particle beam weapon being developed at Brookhaven there in the center of Long Island. This also figures into the downing of the TWA-800. Again, we don't have enough time to go into all of that, but if that's true, then the TWA-800 was in a military test zone 65 miles away, whereas if you turn that beam weapon a little bit further south, it's only 25 miles to the Twin Towers. So the origin of a beam weapon might be closer than space.
That's interesting.
Isn't that fascinating?
I hadn't thought about that at all. That's quite fascinating.
Go research the UFO that crashed in Mauritius Bay in
1989.
89,
I did look into that.
And then there was a huge fire at South Haven Park in 1992 that supposedly was started by a UFO being shot down. And a lot
of that was researched by a guy named John Ford, who is still in prison to this day.
Yeah. He tries to tell the truth, and he's locked away. Have you got a minute? I'll tell you a fascinating story about that.
Yeah, of course. I'd love to hear it.
I was investigating the TWA-800 and with a producer for CBS at the time and a few other people, and we were heading back to New York in late evening, and I saw the sign for South Haven Park, and I said, hey, pull in here a minute, because I thought knowing the story of the UFO crash and fire at South Haven Park in '92, I thought maybe if we could find a place, if that was true, then there should be the tops of trees knocked off and a big burn place somewhere, to substantiate that story. So we pulled into the park, and there was like a park headquarters there, a little building, and one car out front. And I thought, well, I'll stop there and see, if maybe they can tell me where this all happened. But of course, I didn't want to go in there and just say, "Hey, what about the UFO?"
Yeah, right.
So I went in there, and there was a park ranger in there, and I just kind of schmoozed him with my good old boy Texas thing. I said,
Indeed.
"Yeah, I'm up here from Texas," and I said, I was just looking around, and I said, "Say, y'all had a big fire here back in '92?" And he says, "Yeah." And I said, "Did they ever figure out what caused that fire?" And he looked at me real sharply. He says, "You want to know about the UFO, don't you?"
Oh, snap.
Oops. Hello.
What did he say about it?
Well, he said he was there that night, but he couldn't talk about it or he'd lose his job. So he said, but my partner was on, and he's since left. He doesn't work here anymore. And I said, well, would he talk to me? He said, well, I don't know. I said, well, give me his name and number. Let me go talk to him. He said, well, I don't know. I said, let me call and see if that'd be okay with him. And I stood right there while I called the guy on the telephone and talked to him. And the guy said, no, I ain't talking to anybody. Basically.
Oh, that's fascinating.
But hey, as far as I was concerned, it confirmed the whole thing.
Well, it would. I had some misgivings about the 1989 crash. I wrote about it actually in my second volume of history.
Right.
And the only reason I did is, I can't reach John Ford. He's in prison, and it's an interesting question as to why he's in prison. By the way, he was set up.
Yeah.
He was absolutely set up by the leadership of the Long Island Republican Party.
Yep.
Because he had been starting to make accusation of and true accusations, by the way, very high-level corruption in that party.
Yep.
And they certainly seemed to set him up. This didn't look like it was a UFO-related thing, like they were getting him for that. But I had a long talk with Phil Imbrogno about the case, and I realized that Phil's sort of out of the field now, and he's accused of falsifying his own education, and the whole thing just got out. But I will also say that I did deal with Phil in the past, and I always found him to be very helpful and very knowledgeable. And he knew John Ford, and he was familiar with John's research. And Phil just, he said John just was not a very kind of stable guy in his own opinion. And
but hey, I bet you there's people that could say the same thing about you and me and most everybody we know.
Well, no, right, exactly. But that John had taken video and said, "Here, look at this video. Can't you see a UFO here and there?" And Phil said, "Look, I just couldn't see anything." And I've been in that position so many times myself, where people take video that they are convinced, or see images that they're convinced are UFOs.
Well, I'll tell you something.
I didn't really know for John Ford.
Well, I know when I read a lot of Ford's material, and I'm like you, I'm not real sure about. And number one, I think he started off well-intentioned. I think he started off with some good information, and I think he was fed a lot of information that got him off the track, which is standard operating procedure, as you know. But the reason I think there's really something to all that is because of Leonard Stringfield. I don't know if you ever knew Leonard, but
I never had the chance to meet Leonard Stringfield.
He was a great guy and a good researcher. And this thing about the particle beam weapon at Brookhaven, this came with his discussions with one of the scientists there that was working on it. So, I think there's something there. I'm not sure. I'm not sure we've gotten the straight of it, but
the 92 event, there was the 89, there was a 92, and there was a one. I think he might have had it at like 94, 95, if I'm not mistaken. That was the other thing that made me a little bit suspicious of Ford's analysis. I'm thinking the guy lives on Long Island, and he's researching 3 UFO crashes within a few years on Long Island. All of them, really. I just wondered,
which sounds bizarro.
Yeah.
And yet, if the story of the beam weapon is true, and they were using it to knock down UFOs, then you understand why you had 3 in 3 years.
Actually, yes. That that could be the case. So
if.
My initial skeptical approach, it's not that I didn't think that there was nothing to anything that he researched. Right. I just wondered if he was
well, and when you get in communities like that, I mean, I grew up around Carswell Air Force Base, which then became General Dynamics, and they were working on all kinds of advanced, secretive stuff. And then up there at Long Island, holy cow, that's a hotbed of defense industry. And plus you got...
that's where I grew up.
Yeah, and up there at the northern tip, you know, I got a blank. What, you know what I'm talking about, the secret base at the
Montauk.
Montauk. You got Montauk and all that stuff.
Montauk.
And I have done just enough snooping around on Long Island to know that there's a lot of people look sideways and look all around before they say anything. There's an audible feeling of
well, not only that,
concern.
But there are definite underground, secret underground tunnels under the Montauk Point Base, which is called Camp Hero.
Right.
And I know because I was there. I did a TV thing actually a few years ago with Lester Holt of NBC. It was kind of neat for me. But we, on my suggestion, actually, we brought in a team that did the ground penetrating radar.
Yeah.
And ran over the area, and we found tunnels down there.
Yeah.